they're starting out with the why, but they don't even have to go to the what any longer, because it's already known to everyone. So this is a very interesting approach where you can see how this golden circle is really being applied. And this is something that you can also use when approaching externals, is starting out with why are you doing what you're doing, get that really strongly in there, and then focus on the other things. So I just want to check, do we have to do attendance through the chat, or is there another way? Because I'm also trying to check the chat if there are any questions and things, but I'm not sure if this is the way that you do attendance or if it's through a form. Just want to check.
Yeah, attendance will be after this session for today. So
okay, yeah,
you can go ahead.
Perfect. So yeah, you don't have to put it in the chat right now. So please put any questions or any additions. Feel free to add those in the chat because I'll keep checking that. Great. So step number 3 is talking to your audience. So know your audience, doing your research, basically making sure that you know who you are talking to. And this step is really, I mean, every step is important. And this one I will also say is very important. Because you have to know when you approach someone who they are, what their background is, and most importantly, what they are interested in. So here you can see the figure that tries to show, tries to illustrate that. And I really like this figure. I think it's a really good one. So on the left, you can see yourself. So what is it that you want to say? Your full message or your full policy, you could even say in there. On the right, that is the external, the partner that you are talking to or want to talk to. And there you can see what they are interested in. You have to make sure to do your research so that you know, or at least you have an idea of what this circle looks like. So what is the partner that I want to talk to? What are they actually interested in? And then you can go ahead and identify, okay, which part of my policy directly interacts with what they're interested in, because you will find that, of course, these circles will never fully align because you are different organizations or different people, so it will never fully align. So what is key is when you approach someone and you want to have a successful relationship with them or collaboration, you should be able to identify this area and try to target and speak about that area when you interact with them, so that you directly give them something that they would be very interested in to work with you. So that is about the step 3. Also, what is very handy to do in the step 3 is to map out your stakeholders. If you try to identify who should I approach, and then you can use stakeholder mapping as a tool. So for example, this is one example of stakeholder mapping, but there are many different ways in which you can map stakeholders, and this is just one of them. And here you can see that you can map stakeholders in terms of interest and power related to the topic that you want to address. So for example, let's say that I want to change the medical curriculum, then I would say that if you look at medical students, for example, they might have a very high interest because they would want to change the curriculum. Maybe their opinion is aligned with yours, but a low influence, because they are not necessarily the decision makers when it comes to the medical curriculum. However, if you then go to, for example, let's say the national government, they might have a high influence, but not so much of an interest in changing the medical curriculum. So key is trying to find those that have high influence and high interest. Of course, those would be the best to target with your efforts, but also don't leave out the ones that are in high influence and low interest, or low influence and high interest, because those might still be helpful in making your changes eventually become reality. So it's not in the sense of ignoring the ones in the other boxes, but it's more so trying to understand what their role is, and then also making sure that you can adequately approach them based on what their role is. So that's one. Okay, and then step 4, and after this I will stop a bit to see if there are any clarifications needed for the steps. Step 4 is just to do it. So this is one that I find very important to mention, especially when I talk to us as young people, because young people often are their own barriers in their head. Because, for example, you might think I'm not important enough, or my voice shouldn't be in this space because, you know, I am not that old and I haven't been doing this work for 20 years. This is something that we should try as much as possible to push out of our heads, and we should move forward and just do it. And the reason why I say that, there are multiple reasons. So first of all, the perspective of young people is really important. So young people are the largest demographic on this planet, and in many countries they form a very significant part of the population. And besides that, we have grown up in a world that is much different from the generations before us, in the sense that it's digitalizing, it's globalizing. So the way that we look at things and our perspective is also very different. So we definitely add a unique and other voice to the table. Furthermore, we see that young people really interact with their communities, for example, through activities. I'm sure also activities from your LC or your NMO, or otherwise, there's an interaction with the community that might not be so much present in generations that are older than us. So this connection and understanding, also lived experiences, are so different from the generations before us. So our voice is essential and should be included at the table as part of every step. So policy design, implementation, evaluation, our voice should be there. So that's first. So our voice is really important. Should be at the table. We have something to say. And then just underlining again, don't be your own barrier, because you might think that your voice will not be taken seriously, that these people are too high level to interact with you. But I would say that you can be very surprised by how excited people can be about young people speaking up. And this might not always be the case. There might be instances where you don't get a positive response. But then nothing is lost. Then you just continue your advocacy. You try to identify others that can actually help you out and support you in your efforts, and proceed. Because we have to understand that advocacy is a process. It's not a one-time thing. Change doesn't happen overnight. So advocacy is a process, and there will sometimes be setbacks, but at least we should make sure that we try whatever we do from our side, and we shouldn't hold ourselves back. Because in the end, if it's not taken up by those that we want it to take up, then we just continue on. We try to find other solutions. But if we don't even try, then we will never know if we can succeed. So this is a very important step that I want to mention. So so here's an overview of the steps and how you can actually implement your policy. So let me ask at this point, I have some examples to mention after this, but are there any specific questions about these steps that I can answer at this point? You can feel free to raise your hand or use the chat function as well. All right. I don't think I see any questions now, but I'll be very happy to answer any questions that come at the end as well. So quickly, how do we do that in the online setting? So there are different ways in which you can make a change or an impact through your policies in the online setting. So one of them, and this is especially relevant to, for example, WHO high-level meetings, is to create statements. I see one question in the chat, so let me just go to that. Is there a level of influence to attain before speaking up? I don't think so, because influence is just a matter of your position and where you are and who you can interact with. But if you have the opportunity to speak up, you should speak up if you have something to say. And this has nothing to do with your level of influence, because influence can also originate from speaking up. So level of influence should also not be a barrier for you speaking up, because the only thing that should determine whether to speak up or not is whether you have that message. And I think you've established throughout this whole process, talking about policies, that you do have messages to say. So definitely there's that. All right, so thank you for the question. So let's continue with advocacy in the online settings. So at WHO high-level meetings, for example, there are statements where you can contribute to the official proceedings of the meeting. Also, you can go on to do online advocacy. This can be through many different ways, for example, using social media or connecting through email and trying to have that direct contact with important stakeholders. Also, what we have done in IFMSA in important high-level meetings is, for example, to do gender watches or youth watches. So how many times is gender mentioned as part of the issue? For example, a particular gender experiences more of a health issue than another, or as part of a solution. For example, we should include women in the leadership of healthcare to solve this issue. Another one is youth watches with the same sort of approach. So how do you involve youth in the issues, but also how are youth part of the solution, and which countries or otherwise actors are mentioning youth in their statements or interventions. I mentioned already you can connect, for example, through email, Twitter, other social media. It's very important, and a lot of high-level stakeholders are very active on social media platforms, and also things such as Zoom. If there is a Zoom chat, you can also reach out there. There's not always a chat function, but sometimes yes. And many high-level events also have side events where you could go that are organized that are much smaller, for example, and organized by specific NGOs or otherwise, where you can sometimes more directly interact with people that are present. And at the bottom, I have put member engagement, and that is because also the online setting provides a lot of opportunity to directly engage with the constituency that you are representing. So say that you are there on behalf of your local committee or on behalf of your NMO, or even if you're on behalf of IFMSA, it's always a great thing to connect with the constituency that you are representing. So you can give updates in the online setting, you can organize open space discussions to discuss certain points that you want to bring to the meeting, have presentations, and also, of course, share the report afterwards to make sure that there's understanding, engagement, and stimulation as well of this constituency that you are a part of. So these are some other opportunities that have grown bigger and bigger in the online setting. So now, of course, my position is liaison officer to the World Health Organization. So that is what my job is to coordinate our official relations. So I will give you a bit of background on this, and then I will give you some examples of implementation of policies. So the World Health Organization itself, it has the UN mandate to direct and coordinate health, as you might be very well aware of. It was founded on April 7 in 1948. This was also, similarly to IFMSA, after the Second World War ended, with this vision of we should connect together to make sure that conflict like this is avoided in the future, and that we create more understanding and joint decision-making. It is structured in the following way. So there's one headquarters, out of which the main location is Geneva. I just came back from Geneva last night, actually, because I was there for the World Health Assembly. And there are 6 offices in their regions. So in total, the WHO has 6 regions. Does anyone know how many regions the IFMSA has? Any ideas? You can also put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. Let me see. 6, 7, 6 as well. I see 6. So the IFMSA actually has 5 regions, so not 6. So our regions are very similar to the WHO's regions. So you have, for example, the Americas region. You also have the African region. You have the EMR region, European region. But then here comes the difference. In the WHO, you have the Southeast Asia region, and you have the Western Pacific region, which is more the other side of Asia Pacific. And in IFMSA, what we call it is the Asia Pacific region. So those are merged along the big lines. There are some few countries that are different within IFMSA and the WHO, but generally speaking, we only have one Asia Pacific region, and the WHO has those split into 2. So the IFMSA has 5 regions, but we do work directly with all the different 6 regional offices. Then there are also, on the country level, in those situations in which it is deemed necessary or good for the development of policies regarding health, there are national offices from the WHO as well, but those are not present in every country. Some core functions, I will just show this, I will not go through all of them, but I think what is really interesting to mention for this one is that I think during the pandemic, a lot of these core functions have become much more visible to a lot of people around the world. So there might have been people already aware that these were the core functions, but now for sure, a very large proportion of the world is aware of this because what we have seen in the pandemic. So leadership, I mean, Dr. Tedros has become a lot more famous since the pandemic. Research is being stimulated, norms and standards are being set. I'm not sure if any of you have done pathology as your rotation yet, but in there, all the diagnostic criteria are set by the WHO, making policies, articulating policy options to countries. And this is also a very important function of, for example, the country level offices, providing technical support, and finally also monitoring. And that's also, of course, something that's been very visible in the COVID-19 pandemic. So then for the governance, there's the World Health Assembly, which is the main decision-making body. So we should realize that the member states are the ones making the big decisions. There's an executive board, and then finally there's a director general and the regional directors. Those are more on the executive side of making decisions because the big decisions have been made by member states, so by countries directly. So there are different stakeholders that are important in the setting of the United Nations and the World Health Organization. So for example, the UN, of course, is an umbrella over other UN entities, including the WHO. Then the member states, as I said, they are the biggest decision makers. And finally, there's input also from non-state actors that are in official relations. And these are in 4 big groups, such as NGOs, philanthropic foundations, academic institutions, or the private sector. And IFMSA is one of the NGOs there. So let's talk a bit about history. So in 1945, the UN was founded, and then just a few years later, the WHO, because the need for having a specific entity that focuses on health was already identified very early on. The IFMSA was founded, and this is actually a bit related because a lot of young medical students or young professionals went to the WHO and said, I would like to be involved in this. And the WHO said, yes, that's great, but please get yourselves organized. So we've been working with them actually since 1951. And in 1969, we became in official relations. Then in 1982, my position, so someone that directly coordinates our relationship, was created. And this is also the longest standing liaison officer position that exists in the IFMSA. In 2003, we're also recognized by the United Nations. And in 2013, we have the first Youth Pre-World Health Assembly. And I will not explain too much about this because we don't have so much time for that. But I would highly recommend you, if you're interested in engaging more with the World Health Organization and the opportunities that exist in the IFMSA for this, is to check out the website of the IFMSA and specifically go to the Youth Pre-WHA website where you'll find all details on this. So with regards to opportunities, of course, we go to all the big meetings. So I've mentioned already the World Health Assembly, but then we also have the Executive Board meeting. Every one of the 6 regions also meets once per year. And this is something that the IFMSA also attends with a delegation that you can apply to. And finally, what is really important to mention is also on the country level, there are exciting opportunities and ways to go about engagement with the WHO. And this is what I will mention as 2 of the examples. And then finally, I will mention the Youth Council. So those will be my 3 examples of successful implementation of policy and really using those external affairs strategies to make it happen. So first of all, youth delegates. What is this? Youth delegates are a specific program where a country that goes to a WHO high-level meeting has a specific spot in their delegation for a youth representative. And right now, it's very exciting. We have 8 youth delegate programs. At the beginning of the year, it was only 5. So this is really growing fast now, which is really exciting. And this is a really good way for youth engagement and can be extremely meaningful because this person can bring the voice of young people from their country directly to their member state, who is making the decisions at the World Health Assembly. As we said before, they are the biggest decision makers. And then also, it allows the youth delegate to also bring back what they have learned directly to the young people in their country afterwards through sessions or a report or otherwise. So this is one example, and it's been very exciting to see that there has been success in setting those up this year. If you Google IFMSA Youth Delegate Toolkit, what you will find is a toolkit that specifically gives instructions and advice on how to set up these programs. And also in there, you can see examples of very successful youth delegate programs that have been set up so far. So if you want to dive more into this, I would recommend you to check that out. And then secondly, I mentioned that there are around 150 offices on the national level of the WHO. So another meaningful way to engage with the WHO is to have relations with the country office. So for example, for NIMSA Nigeria, to work directly with them on certain activities, campaigns, etc. So this is another great opportunity for engagement with the WHO. And within the next week, I will release a new toolkit, actually, in addition to the Youth Delegate Toolkit, which focuses specifically on this topic. So how do I set up a relationship with my WHO country office? So that's something that I would recommend you to keep your eye out on. And then finally, what I will mention as an example of successful implementation of our policy around meaningful youth engagement is the WHO Youth Council. So actually, just now, the Youth Council has been launched very recently. This has been an advocacy process of 5 years, if you can believe it or not. In 2017, the IFMSA first came with the idea to the current Director General, and now it's finally become reality after 5 years of efforts and advocacy, and now we are here. And this Youth Council is a new mechanism for young people to be engaged with the WHO. So I just wanted to mention that, and more information will be coming out shortly. But the way that it looks is that we have youth organizations that are working on the international level, such as the IFMSA, engaged with the Youth Council, and they will start specific activities to make sure that the voice of youth is being heard at the WHO. So that's another example that I wanted to mention. Now, I don't have a lot of time, as I mentioned, so I cannot go into much further detail at this point. So I will stop my presentation here, but I would love to answer some questions before it's the end of our session today. So I think I see that there's one hand already, Majesty. I'm not sure if Majesty is here. If you are here, feel free to speak up and share your question. Is there anyone else that has a question as we wait? Majesty, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
When you spoke about the number of regions the IFMSA has, you said 5.
Yeah.
But when you were listing them, I don't know if I was one who actually misunderstood you, but I think I could hear you mention 6, if I wasn't mistaken.
So I mentioned 6 regions, which are the 6 regions of the WHO. And then in IFMSA, the way that we go about it is that the Asia Pacific region is one region. So Southeast Asia and Western Pacific, that are WHO regions, in IFMSA are just one. And it's called Asia Pacific region.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma. I appreciate
No worries. Thank you for the question. I hope that clarifies it.
Yes.
Is there anyone else that has a question? I don't see any questions at this point in time. So I've mentioned a lot of resources and also how to find them, but just for ease, what I'm doing as well is I'll put in the chat a link to the WHO IFMSA database in which you can all find the resources as well. So if you want to take a look at those, feel free to do so. So I see another question from Abdullahi. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, but please go ahead.
Hi, Iris. Thank you for a great session. My question is, how do we make policies sustainable? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. So there are different aspects to this. I think it's not necessarily the policy that's the sustainable part, because the policy needs to be updated regularly to stay relevant and up to date. What I would say is that the outcomes, that which you want to achieve with your policy, that should be the sustainable one. So that you make sure that what you are achieving actually remains to be there, and it's not just a one-off thing, but actually makes an impact for a longer time. And the way to do that is different approaches. Most of all, when you're starting a collaboration, one way to make it very sustainable is to actually write that down. Write down what are the expectations from both sides. And the ways in which you can do that is, for example, writing what we call a memorandum of understanding, which is actually a legally binding document, which ties both organizations to specific expectations that you've laid out. So this is, for a collaboration, a way to make it sustainable. Also, for example, for the Youth Council, what we have done with the World Health Organization is also create a document. It's called a Terms of Reference, where all of the details of the council are written to make sure that this is sustainable and something that will continue to be implemented even after the young people that have implemented it now are not in the organizations anymore, to make sure that it's still implemented. So I think writing it down and making sure that there's a document that can actually be followed up on is a really important one. And secondly, handover is essential, especially in youth organizations where our turnover is so fast. Usually we have terms of 1 or 2 years only. We have to make sure that those who follow us in our positions have a good handover so that they have all the tools and all the knowledge and skills needed to make sure that they can adequately follow up on those things that have been decided before, and make sure that the outcomes remain to be sustainable. So this is, I think, the 2 aspects that I would mention here. I see some other questions, so I will quickly touch upon first the ones in the chat. Then we see, do national offices permit involvement in all of the core functions of the WHO? This really depends. So this would have to be explored together with the country office, where you can actually support each other and collaborate. So that would be a very context-specific question that needs to be explored with the country office in question. When the country office toolkit comes out, which will be shared on IFM's social media and on the email servers, you take a look there so that you can see the examples of successful relations and what exactly they have done together. Then I see another question. Are there any, let me see. Are there any challenges for policymakers generally? That's a very broad question. I'm not sure if I can answer that now. Maybe you can specify a bit what you mean, because I think we can always identify many challenges, but I'm not sure how to interpret your question. Then I think after that, Stephen, you raised your hand, so maybe I can take your question now.
Yes, hello, thank you. You mentioned that it took the WHO about 5 years to implement the policy on youth inclusion. So my question is that, does it always take that long for a policy to be implemented? Have other policies by the IFMSA been implemented, and how long did they take? Did they also take 5 years?
No, that's a very good question. And definitely it does not always take that long. So I hope you're not discouraged by that number. So what I would recommend you to do is go to the IFMSA policy documents webpage. So you can just Google that and you will get there. And there you will see our policy documents for the current moment in time. And you will see that all of them, they are valid for 3 years only, after which we update them. And in there, you will find specific calls to action, like a lot of them that we work on with our partners, many of them which are achieved quite soon after the policy document is achieved. The reason why this one was quite slow is because the WHO is, of course, a huge and quite bureaucratic organization that needs a lot of considerations when they are developing certain initiatives. So it's a relatively more slow process, but something with eventually a potential for high impact. So that is why it had this timeline. Then I see, is policy the same as constitution? I think for that question, there was another session on policy development. So I would refer you to that one, because I think they probably dived more into that in that session. And it would take a long time to explain that now. So I will refer you to that question, and also the IFMSA policy document website, so that you can get a bit of a better idea of what policy documents can look like. Then the next question, you mentioned that there are opportunities for youth in the WHO. what are these opportunities? How do we get to know about them? So what I would recommend you to do is take a look at the link that I've just shared, the IFMSA WHO database, and there you will find a lot of opportunities that are existing. And to engage in them, make sure that you're signed up for the IFMSA email servers and also IFMSA social media, because whenever there is an opportunity for you to get engaged, we are sharing it there. So make sure to involve yourself through those opportunities. And thank you for the question as well. And then there's a question about what a policy statement means. A policy statement is usually sort of a summary of the background and mostly the calls to action very clearly at the beginning of the policy document, so that it's very clearly to be found at the beginning and strongly calling for action. So I think those were all the questions now, and I think we're also at the end of our time. So if there are no more questions, then I would like to thank you again for letting me be here with you. And I hope that you gained some more insight, even though it was a lightning session and it went very fast. But again, use the IFMSA website and also the link that I shared with you, the IFMSA WHO database, for any background info and to learn anything further. And I'd be happy to support in any other way as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Iris, for this session. It was really enlightening. So we appreciate you for also accepting our invitation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so by now I think we'll take our attendance by this time. So I'll be sending the link for the attendance to the group chat now. So you can kindly fill it before we close. So I'll be giving 3 minutes for that. I think that will be enough for each and every one of us. So I'll be sending it now to the group chat so you can use it to fill in your form.
Sorry, group chat.
Can you hear something now? We are done.
Okay, can you hear me now? I think the NIMSA president is here and the Scoopy director also. So I think they have one or two things to say before we go. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay,
Hello, can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you now, sir.
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you all for this meeting. I would like to call on the NIMSA president.
Yeah, okay, and good evening, everyone. I think the NIMSA president is here. He has one or two things to say, so he'll be coming up. Sorry, the Scoopy director is having some network issues.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Hope I don't have network issues as well. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
We
Okay,
can hear you
perfect.
clearly.
Yeah. So once again, it's a pleasure to be here in this policy training, and it's a pleasure having one of the most experienced minds and experienced hands in policy writing, policy making, and policy advocacy serve as a facilitator in this session. So I consider it a great honor for UNIMSITE to have experienced such a person without having gone through rigorous, or should I call it a very rigorous process. I think my first encounter with Iris was during the 74th World Health Assembly, where I met her by virtue of her being the liaison officer to WHO. So it's wonderful having such intelligent mind and having such hardworking person and resourceful person serve as our facilitator today. And I don't know whether she's online, but on behalf of the Nigerian Medical Students Association, I say a very big thank you. And we are grateful for being here, for being present here, despite the rigors of the World Health Assembly that just ended 2 days ago. So that being said, I would equally want to thank the participants that has been online from the beginning of this session till the end of this session. And thank you so much for being committed to policy writing. Thank you so much for being committed to policy advocacy and implementation. It's a very thoughtful one. And as an association, we hope to have very resourceful policy writers, and using our own influence on the side of the leadership of NIMSA, we'll see how best we can push these policies to the relevant stakeholders in order to effect change and make a difference. So that being said, once again, it's a pleasure being here in your midst. Thank you so much for your commitments thus far in this policy academy, policy training. It's very laudable, and once again, thank you. Thank you to the Scopi director who came up with this initiative and his team. It's a very wonderful one. It's a very laudable one, and I wish you more success, more impact, and I believe this already is impact oriented. So thank you so much, and thank you for all you do for NIMSITE, and we look forward to more initiatives and more impact-oriented initiatives. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure once again.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate your presence here and for the comments you have given and the advice you have given and the trainings for this program. We really appreciate it. Then I don't know whether the Scoopy director has a more better network now. I don't know if you can see one or two things. Concerning the form, I'll be closing it now. So because I already have 115 and attendance so far, so I'll be closing it now. So I feel some people are still sending it. So I would like to give you 1 minute, please. Just 1 minute. Ensure that you fill the form before I close it.
I can't find the form, please. Please, where did you put it?
Godwin, are you asking a question? I didn't hear you.
Please, I can't find the form. Like, where is it?
Please check the chat. Please check the chat.
Hello, please. You said you placed the link on the chat. I can't see any link there. Hello?
Wow. I think I've been sending it since. I don't know. I'll still send it again. I've been sending it since. I don't know.
Wait, to the WhatsApp group or Telegram?
In the chat here on Zoom, in Zoom here, not in Telegram.
Okay. Let me see that.
And why would you be saying it is your fault? My daughter, Madam, please forgive us.
Okay, I think we have covered this session. I think the school director is having some network issues. He hasn't been able
This
to.
now.
So I think we have come to the end of this session. So we are going to have a review session next Saturday by 2 to 3 p.m. So I'll like all of us to attend. We basically look at how that's when the coursework one B will be given, and we'll start working on it. That will basically be the work of those moving to the next stage of the program, working on the end of the course. So I'll advise everyone to attend this session on Saturday. So thank you all for coming for this session. I really appreciate your presence. Concerning the link, I would like to say we had some issues with the link. We tried to stream and we faced some technical issues while we were streaming. That's why the link got messed up earlier. So sorry for that. So we have come to the end of today's session. So I would like to say good night to everyone.
Hello, Joshua, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Joshua,
can hear you. Yes, we can hear you now, sir.
Nothing to feed on. Nobody to call my phone. And that was when.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yes, can you hear me?